You're listening to Rookie Pirate Radio, the official anime and manga podcast for InBetweenDrafts.com. I'm John Negroni.
And I'm Travis Hymas.
And today we're doing a manga recap of One Piece chapter 1084, titled The Attempted Murder of a Celestial Dragon. And we are going to attempt to record these manga recaps on time moving forward, Travis. We do have to apologize for our collective lateness this week. It is completely my fault.
I mean, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The person listening to this next week is going to be like, wouldn't know any different, right? But yes, as usual, we will be discussing spoilers for the One Piece manga up until this chapter. So if you have not yet read chapter 1084, be sure to do so now for free on the Viz website. We always link to that in the show notes. And remember, all new chapters will be available to read for free up to 3 weeks after the official release, or whenever you want if you are a member of Shonen Jump, which we are and do recommend. Also, we want to hear from you, the listener, of course. If you'd like to add your own thoughts to the ongoing One Piece discussion, like a theory or some speculation or a correction of something we've said, you can always email us. Our email address is rookiepirateradio@gmail.com, or even better, come join our Discord server, where we have a special channel dedicated just to One Piece spoilers and discussion. Plus, you can find all kinds of other server or channels on the server, everything else in the universe of In Between Drafts, music, films, TV, books, comics, whatever you like. You can find all that info and then some in the show notes for this episode. Travis, chapter 1084, it's out. We have both had a lot of time to process it. Have you processed it at all?
I've been doing nothing but processing it. This is one of those moments where, like, I tell people who don't read One Piece, like, it's hard to capture the energy of what it means to be in a moment with the community like this, where nobody knows what's going to happen and everybody is hyped about it. It's like watching sports, or it is. It's like watching sports. It's like watching a playoff game. Sports. It's like watching a playoff game. We're all screaming in the stadium, and if you're not like, if you don't care at all about what's going on, I cannot explain to you in good conscience, other than I care so much, and I care so much about what everybody else's energy right now, that like this is the only thing I have been thinking about realistically for days now. It's bizarre, but I love it.
We've been spending, it is like sports in the sense that we spend so much time pontificating on the thing before the thing happens, after the thing happens. It's nothing but commentary. I've seen endless spoilers, or not spoilers, theories and ideas for what's going on and what this chapter might be about, because so many big revelatory things happen in it. But I'll say I have plenty that I want to share that's on my mind. I'm anxious to hear what you have to say, so let's do it. Let's go through the main beats of this chapter. Let's talk about what happened. And
let's do it.
There is a color spread. I feel like I have to mention the color spread. It is nice. It's pretty. There's a fish. And lots of characters who are outside of the Straw Hat Pirates, which is interesting. That's not a normal thing. We don't get to see that very often. But going on to the chapter itself, we begin chapter 1084 inside Pangea Castle, inside Sacred Mary Joa, where Sabo meets up with Jewelry Bonnie, and they pretty quickly decide to help each other find Kuma. Sabo and Bonnie narrowly avoid being seen by a group of guards, and one of them mentions that when guards go missing in Pangea Castle, it's usually because they saw something called the Lost Chamber. Afterward, Bonnie departs for Egghead and puts Kuma's rescue into the Revolutionary Army's hands, and we cut next to King Cobra's meeting with the Five Elders. Cobra recounts the history we already know about how the royal families who took over the world during the Void Century moved to Mary Joa and became celestial dragons, with no one person to rule them and sit on the throne. But we do get some new information when Cobra reveals that the Alabasta monarch who did not join the Celestial Dragons was named Nefertari Lily, who chose to return to Alabasta but apparently disappeared from the history books and was replaced by her younger brother. Cobra asks if the Gorosei can tell him anything about Lily, but they claim her reasons and actions have long been lost to the cobwebs of time. So Cobra then asks the Gorosei, kind of out of nowhere, what is the D? He's like a One Piece fan, really. To which one of them asks why Cobra would ask that. And he says there is a brief 800-year-old letter that Lily passed down through their line of kings. We then abruptly go to the castle courtyard, where Shirahoshi has been put in chains by Kuma at the order of St. Charlos, and then the Ryugu princes rush in to save her, but are blocked by Kuma, only for Rebecca, the Tantata pirates, Sai, and Miosgard to arrive on time to save them. And Miosgard tells the princes to stay back so the pirates can step in and intervene, and sure enough, Sai and Leo land a double blow on Charlos, thought to be lethal by the crowd, and me, quite honestly. Kuma is then snatched up by Morley, with Karasu's crow arriving with Sabo's handcuffs key, and we finish the chapter with the arrival of a great emu entering the throne room and sitting on the throne, revealing themselves to King Cobra and uttering Lele. Break next week. Did that cover it, Travis? Did I miss anything?
Yeah, and I do want to highlight again that to an outside observer, it's probably very weird that a few weeks ago, you and I were up in arms about some old guys getting off of their chairs, and now we're up in arms about someone sitting down. Like, it's what a wonderful juxtaposition of a One Piece chapter, that you have these very serious action scenes, you have a lot of plot happening, and the most exciting thing is, well, this person sat in a chair, and I'm sure we have plenty to talk about. We should talk about all the other things first, shouldn't we?
All the other things. I just wanted to note, because, we see Sabo fighting some guards, and I'm sure the anime is going to have a bunch of running around. It's going to have that sound effect, the running. But, the whole jewelry Bonnie thing, I honestly get the sense that Oda had another idea for Bonnie's role and purpose here and just changed it close to the last minute, because it's pretty anticlimactic. It doesn't seem to serve much of a purpose, and it's written very quickly. It almost feels like he's kind of rushing it, because he's like, I don't really have time to get into this, but it's just kind of strange to me, because she's just sort of like, yes, I read about you revolutionary boys in the newspaper. I trust you completely. No. I don't buy that. Why does she trust them, Travis? I don't get it.
So it's it's one of these things where we have to try to presume what a character knows and what they don't know. I am going to attribute this to two things. Number one, if we don't address Jewelry Bonnie interacting with the revolutionaries, we have a plot hole from a previous conversation that Bonnie had with Luffy. So we're probably going to loop back to that eventually, and this kind of helps keep that consistent. The other thing is, we still don't know the nature of the relationship that Bonnie has with Kuma prior to all the Terminator stuff. So, that's still something that we need to see play out. It seems like to me she knows her father's backstory, at least his relationship with the revolutionaries, which seems to be a secret thing for most people. It is weird that the government doesn't seem to be trying to extract that information from Kuma if they know that he was a revolutionary. So that might be why she's like, I know you guys, but playing cards close to her chest. It's difficult to predict what someone doesn't know when they don't tell us what they don't know. But, at the end of the day, I think it's just one of those things where it's easier to clean this up this way than try to make it. I mean, this is a sizably long chapter. We've had a lot of things happening very quickly. I would say this is just trying to clean the board up a little bit. It's especially depending on where we go next week. The
chapter does do that. It kind of wraps up the Kuma thing, and the one of the other things that we were teased about a while ago, which was, a celestial dragon, was almost murdered. And we were like, well, no, was that Miosgard? I know I was thinking that, but no, it's a little bit more straightforward than I think a lot of us predicted. I think for me, what this is all, to your point, it's kind of like wrapping up kind of quickly, so that I think by the next chapter, this is what I see playing out. I think we need one more pretty major revelation either from Emu or Cobra or somebody. And then we kind of have to get into the point where Sabo is in the throne room, sees Emu, and is then framed for this death. And I'm not sure how that's going to play out, because it seems weird to me that Sabo would stand before all of these like very powerful, intimidating people and would get away from that, get out of that. I'm not sure how that is going to be like logistically possible for Sabo to be in the crosshairs of all these characters, unless, you know, it is confirmed that the Gorosei are just not really like toughies. I wondered too if like one major revelation I think would be nice in the next chapter, and especially if the next chapter is going to be our transition finally to another part of the world, possibly Egghead. I get the sense that we're going to Kuma and Bonnie and that stuff next on the Egghead Island part of the arc, which is still this arc, by the way. But I could see the revelation of one of the Holy Knights come into play here. Just something really like, whoa, happening to sort of like tie this all off, I think would be good. But at the same time, we haven't gotten a ton of those in the other sort of split off things. I guess we have, because we have, you know, Kid getting eliminated, his entire crew getting eliminated, Law getting defeated. We had the whole thing where Kuzan shows up and fights Garp. So we do kind of end usually with like some kind of major, like, all right, now we're going to do the off-screen no me. But yeah, do you think my prediction has flaws?
No, because you're right. There is that question of, you know, we know where this ends, which is a weird thing for a flashback. We actually know a lot about where this is all supposed to take us. So there has to be some reason we're spending the extra time here, and we'll get to what that probably is later. But with Sabo, if he's going to be going looking for a lost chamber, which I'm just going to assume is the flower chamber that Emu is usually in.
I think it's the one with the hat.
Could be the one with the hat, too. I would even say that those two rooms are probably directly connected to each other. Maybe.
Again, have you heard the theory that I forget, I can't credit this theory, I apologize, but I read one theory where someone claimed that the Lost Chamber connects to Egghead.
That would be hilarious. That would genuinely be so funny, I would believe it. That would be the funniest thing in the entire world. That's great. Just like they're right on the doorstep. Like that's how we just get to the final arc. It's just like, oh, we tripped over some plot and ended up in the.
It's a decent. It really is a decent theory, because the idea is that you know, what's her name? York says that there's a room that no one can go to, and some of the like framing around like the text kind of implies that like it people have also pointed out the Iron Giant character, you know, the big thing, like how did it get to marry Joa? Why is Kuma going to marry Joa? You know, like there could be like that being the connection.
I think some of these questions. So the Iron Giant has a question because Vegapunk arranged it to be brought to Egghead. Without the government noticing. He leveraged some favors for that. We do know that he did that. The other stuff, though, you know, that's plenty of stuff in play. And again, it would be a very funny gag. And at the end of the day, that's if you could get a laugh out of it, Oda's going to go for it.
I mean, people go missing. Like that's again, why would people go missing? Because they're getting warped over to Egghead.
Well, so and that does bring an interesting question. How active is Emu even in Pangea Castle? Because we know that they, I should say, because you know, they have attendants for sure that know who they are, and the Gorosei know who they are. But if a guard, hypothetically speaking, encounters them, they get erased. They go missing. And obviously, presumably, it's kind of the setup. So it's interesting that there is this ruler that supposedly has all the power in the world, but it's just not being perceived anywhere. And I'm curious about how that all is supposed to work.
Right, because clearly the Celestial Dragons don't know about it. Right? They can't. Because the whole idea, right, is that the Celestial Dragons can't know that there is somebody kind of in charge. But then how is there somebody in charge? The logistics, it just doesn't make sense to me fully here, because it's like there is somebody in charge, and that's the Gorosei, at least under the presumption of the Celestial Dragons. I feel like we're just missing a connective tissue between who the Gorosei are to the Celestial Dragons and why they are under their thumb or if they think they are at all. And then why does Emu have to exist? Why does Emu have to sit on the throne? Like, what is it that Emu's doing that has any sort of meaning or purpose?
At the risk of being a Star Wars nerd for a minute here, one of the things that kind of comes up a lot of times with trying to explain how the Empire works in Star Wars is that's usually how jobs get created in the Empire. Is somebody asks, well, was the Emperor really doing this? Did Darth Vader really kill all the Jedi himself? That kind of thing, and that leads to, like all governments, bureaucracy and delegation. So, Palpatine did all of his weird Sith stuff in the background while the day-to-day running of things were done by the Grand Moffs, by Vader, by all of these other delegations, Thrawn when he shows up in a few months, that kind of thing. So my guess is that Emu isn't doing the day-to-day running of the world government. That is, in fact, the Gorosei. That is, in fact, the world government as an organization. This is probably something a little bit more esoteric in terms of the Gorosei themselves are celestial dragons who know the truth, either by being as old as Sin themselves or through, their own descended letters being left behind. We don't know still. The fact that Emu remains a silhouette is, of course, the biggest mystery of all, because at this point, as soon as we know what they look like, the floodgates are open, is the way that I see it. That itself is going to be some kind of revelation that kicks off everything. Either they're super old, or they look like Vivi, or something else entirely. But that really does seem like the final little key we got, or Jenga block we got to pull out of this tower to start bringing some things down. But I know we're going to spend so much time talking about this, so I don't want to blow off everything else in the chapter. But I guess to transition inadvertently to one of these theories, the question of that a lot of theories are coming around on, is Emu Lily, this character that's just been referenced and also silhouetted in this chapter. And I don't want to completely discount it, but I do have issues with it, and a lot of it comes down to why. What purpose does that serve? I mean, that's the same way you're talking about.
Yeah, it's the same kind of thing I'm thinking. It's I want to get to the heart of what's the motivation for this character, and then work backwards from there of okay, then who is the character? What kind of motivation could they have? And I think it's almost like the chapter is written in a way to make you think that it's Lily, because of just all the implications of seeing Emu walking in the flower chamber, stopping at the image of Vivi. Oda's probably aware in some form or fashion that there are a lot of theories out there that Emu is a woman, because of the connection to the backwards, the mother sea, and that theory that's been around since Reverie. And to me, it's not as interesting. I guess it's not as thematically interesting to me, because it's kind of, we're told here that Lily disappeared, right? And so can I tell you my little harebrained Lily theory that is probably wrong?
But of course.
I just really like the idea that Lily is Toki, who I understand. I can hear the gasping over there, hyperventilating of oh my gosh, why didn't I think of that? Look, I know her hair is not exactly blue. It's kind of a bluish green, to be fair. But I was just thinking, who are characters we know from that era? And I just really like the idea of Toki, a character who went forward in time, and this character disappearing. And how could they just disappear like that? And then having a connection between Wano and Alabasta, I think could be really cool. And also the idea that Momo and what was her name? Hiyori. Momo and Hiyori being connected in a more direct way to a character who, again, it would be connected to Zunisha, because I also was thinking, what if Emu had been a Nakama to like Lily and Joy Boy and this like band of characters. And I just had in my head of like, what if these characters were like the original pirates together or something, and the gang got broken up to some extent. And again, we're even implying that Emu was around back then. We don't know for sure. We don't know anything about Emu. Emu could be, Luffy's mom for all we know. But yeah, I have it in my head that it's Toki, or it was Toki. And
so you say that that's your completely out of nowhere crankpot theory. And this is going to be credit to a listener who doesn't post much in the Discord, but who I talk to on the daily, and has believed this theory before we ever had the name Lily to work with. He has been telling me aggressively for months now that Toki is tied into this, and he genuinely believed them to be a relative of Vivi for an extended period of time.
That's incredible.
He's like, I might be right on, like, Sunday morning, he's messaging me going, I might be right on this. I might have got it.
Well, you know what? I feel less ridiculous.
You are not ridiculous, in fact. Toki is one of those interesting things because Oda doesn't like giving just straight spoilers, right? We're not supposed to know what Toki's deal was, because to know would tell us too much, right? No spoilers. Luffy doesn't want the journey spoiled for him. Even Odin's journal getting into the hands of Yamato is just too dang close to Luffy finding some things out that he doesn't want to know.
I mean, it fits right, because if there's a character who knows like the timing of when something's supposed to happen, which is the implication of like why Toki sent Momo 20 years forward in time, that mystery hasn't been solved. Right. We don't know why that happened or why she did that, right?
Well, I mean, more so to that, we don't know why she left the Void Century or why she was seeking Wano in the first place. Exactly. Her ending up with Odin was a stroke of luck, right? It just so happened she happened upon the future ruler of Wano in her time travels. Right. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But she was going to Wano with an agenda, right? But then she ends up with Odin, and they're on Whitebeard's ship, and they're there for an extended period of time. Whatever she was doing wasn't urgent to begin with. So, but she also didn't know where Wano was. On top of everything else, she didn't seem to be much of a pirate herself. In terms of having, I would say in terms of having sailing ability, but neither does Luffy. But she didn't really strike us as a pirate when we first encountered her. But royalty, now that's an interesting idea to work with. And so now that we know that, we now know the name of one of the original world government founders, technically, that really does bring up the question again. Where is Toki from? Who is she? What was her agenda and mission? In theory, it wasn't completed, right? Because she knew, ultimately all of these things that were going to happen. Or was the entire point to get to Wano and set it up so that no matter what, we would have a Joy Boy passing through or something,
Something about Wano opening its borders is extremely important.
Well, it's because we know why, though, because that's where Pluton is.
Yeah.
Which she might know if she was actually Lily.
So then the idea would be that Toki, like Lily, Toki, whoever, had a change of heart or didn't really want to join the Celestial Dragons, or was like the one rebel or something. And, a lot of this depends on like what is in that letter, right? I looked up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I looked up what's in the name, what Toki means in Japanese. It's a girl's name. And it literally means when, but it also means like time of opportunity. And it's like, I think in typical Oda fashion, I think there's just something very interesting connecting that kind of concept with the Nefertari Lily name, which is like Alabasta has always been based on Egyptian stuff, and I think people have been all over, like there's an actual like Nefertari character, like person, a queen. There's all kind of connections between like their lily flowers we see in like the flower chambers, all kinds of things that I feel like are atmospheric details. But when it comes right down to it, like what's going on here? Why is this character important? To me, I settle on this character means so much to Emu. Emu cares about this character so much. I mean, people have even said that it might be a romantic thing. I think it could be as simple as they were crewmates in Nakama together. I think it has to be something wild connecting these two characters for Emu to go on that throne and reveal themselves to Cobra. Because that is just, it's something that caused a lot of problems for the world government ultimately, because now Stabo is the Flame Emperor. And clearly, Emu did this for an emotional reason, not a tactical one. And I think that that's something people should take note of. Because
can I give you one of my crackpot theories?
Mm-hmm.
So we know that Emu. We theorize, I guess I should. We theorize that Emu is the recipient of the vaunted immortality surgery.
It's a guess. I think it's an educated guess.
But let's look at what we have seen Emu do. And what we've seen Emu do is very impulsive, yet soft actions. In the flower garden, they're pleasant, they're calm. They're contemplative, but they also have no problems being very aggressive and stabby towards something as innocuous as a wanted poster. You might even say that it was some sort of temper tantrum.
Yeah.
And now you have this impulsive action, this as you very I think accurately put it, non-tactical situation that creates a problem. And I think about Monkey D. Luffy. I think about our boy, and I think about his dream, and I think about all of our conversations about what is Luffy's dream, and the thing that I always come back with, regardless of the theory, is that whatever it is, it has to be something so simple a child can think of it, and not only a child can think of it, only a child could conceive of it without reality slipping in. And I think about how Luffy is a foil for many of the enemies that we encounter over the course of One Piece. And I come to the same conclusion every single time that I think about this. And that is, Emu is a child.
A child?
Not like an infant, but they are younger than we think.
They are not like small, like a bunch. Like I saw some people joking that Emu is like a bunch of Tatata tribe members, like in a trench coat. like a teenager, just as impulsive as Luffy. Because that's the thing to remember, right? Is most of the Straw Hats are quite young. I mean, it's foreshadowed by the Seraphim.
There's also the Seraphim, who are also literally children. But yeah, I think about just the actions that Emu's taking and how impulsive they are. They don't really match the actions of the Gorosei, right? As we've known them, and the problems that's created, as you've pointed out. It's almost like they're taking orders from a child. And
it's worth a think.
Curious. I think it's worth, if they're living forever, an eternal child might be the most complicated enemy for Luffy to face off against. Someone who is effectively just as childlike as him, and that's the thing that Oda's really thought about. I know our Discord pointed out a few weeks ago when it was Luffy's birthday that Luffy and Gon from Hunter x Hunter have the same birthday, and they thought that was interesting, and it is because that's Children's Day in Japan. That's why it's their birthdays. Both of those writers are. They love making this stuff that is ultimately for children. They love bringing joy to children. So their characters resemble that energy. And so I think to myself, maybe Emu's not this ancient, old, decrepit person, but maybe something else entirely. Something we haven't faced yet, which would be, it would open up possibilities.
Yeah. Can I I'm curious. I don't remember if did I send you the thing about how the throne kind of looks like the Grand Line?
Yeah, you did.
Okay, I was gonna say, yeah, which I can't believe I never noticed it before. Maybe you had ages ago, but I just wanted to point that out, that it's interesting that the throne itself looks a lot to me like it almost, like when you see Emu like sitting on it, the silhouette kind of almost looks like the throne itself, like the long pointy thing going down to like the person. And so I don't know if there's some kind of like little bit of metaphor fun happening there, but for people listening, if you look at the throne, the idea is you can actually see like a strip, like a narrow strip with like little dots, and those seem to represent like islands, like the islands of the Grand Line. And then at the end of it, you have 4 circles surrounding a circle in the center. And so the theory is that those 4 circles are the road poneglyphs, and that's how the Straw Hats and everybody else, that's how they're going to find Laugh-Tale. Now, it's not clear to me, like, does Lodestar kind of factor in this? I don't know. I can't keep up with all that stuff. Too confusing. But I just thought it was kind of interesting that all the weapons are kind of laid there too. And there could be sort of this like transition into like what happens, after the Straw Hats do their thing. And I kind of like the idea of like, is that where like Vivi's character is going to go? Because she's still in the story. She's active in the story and she's considered an honorary Straw Hat. I kind of wonder, is she going to be the person who's going to like lead the next, government or whatever it is, and try to like usher in a new era of prosperity, or however Oda is going to tie things together. I just wanted to put that out into the universe.
Yeah, when it comes to the throne, I think the thing that's most striking to me is just how much larger it was than I really thought about before. And I think it was Grand Line Review pointed this out too. I think that's where the Tontada joke originated, was this chair is so big, big like a straw hat. Kind of thing.
We know a lot of things were a lot bigger back in the Ancient Kingdom times. Yeah.
So that's an interesting thing too. I do see the dots there. I'm curious to see how this all gets animated, because this is one of the more detailed depictions of this throne that we've had in quite a while. I look at it and I see the big world government symbol, and it kind of like Emu just kind of like sits right, like the crown just like just barely touches it, like, and they call this throne the center of the world. So like you're right in the very least that like this is where the world government symbol really does intersect. This is where it all meets and comes to a head for sure. So the symbolism in the throne is there 100%.
Literal symbolism. Yeah. I wonder what those little animals are on the side. They kind of remind me of like the creatures from Wano.
They look like big lions, right? Like
kind of
not like the ones from Mono, like you were saying. They have a name for them, don't they?
A name for the character.
Yeah.
I don't remember if there was a name for the creature itself, but yeah, I mean, there was like Japanese mythology that I think Oda was drawing from in that specific case with that specific character.
Now that I'm looking at it right now, I'm like zoomed in on the final panel here, and if you look below, just directly below those.
They're making noises. I can hear them.
Sorry. He wants to be loud. 1 second. I have every door shut and everything, and he just gets louder. Sorry about that.
He's the goodest boy.
He's the goodest boy. I'm going to take that from the top there. So I'm looking at this panel here. I'm looking at the final panel, and right below these little, cat-esque things, it almost looks like a waterfall.
Hmm. Yeah, it's true. Is that like where the Wano thing kind of comes into play?
Well, I'm thinking maybe they're not aquatic creatures, but literally creatures of water.
Sure, the Sea Kings are what kind of guard this area. You could say that they represent like those little swirly things going in the circle. We could talk all day about this.
Or going back to the Umi theory, right? That if Emu has a devil fruit, it's the power of the ocean, or that they themselves are the sea devil,
Right. And there's a theory out there that the devil fruit thing, it could be something that originated like in Mary Joa, or that Emu has control or has some kind of like fascination with it. Man, I'm even looking at this one panel where you see Emu walking away from the snail, and they really do look kind of like a kid, like in that silhouette. And so it's pretty interesting to consider. But anyway, I think after that, the one thing that we haven't gotten to is Cobra asking the question, what is the D? Right?
Yep. That's the other big thing.
Not what is the will of D? What is the D?
What is the D?
And this reminded me
asking the most important question of all time.
This reminded me of a theory from so long ago Like I remember, I think it was back when I was reading Water 7, like just ages ago. I wasn't even reading like week to week back then. But there was this theory that somebody came up with where they're like, what if the D is a poneglyph symbol? I've always liked that idea, right? Like there are people who are like, oh, it's like a half smiley face. It's like a half moon. A lot of people speculated, and there's like all these theories that like the D clan are from the moon. Like, you know, there's all kinds of fun stuff like that. But the way he asked this question really resurrected that what is the will of D like theory for me, because I hadn't thought about it in a while. But the fact that it's Cobra asking it, Cobra, who was the king who was like safeguarding a poneglyph in Alabaster, right? And then, you know, we don't know, like nobody knows what it is. They're like, what is the D? What is the purpose of the D? Why would they be so obsessed with that if not for it being something related to a language that no one can read, and to the point where not even Robin knows what it is? So if we're kind of sticking with the Egyptian theme and poneglyphs are like hieroglyphics, I kind of wonder if that's where Oda's going with this, that the D is like part of a letter, a word, or a phrase or something that is going to ladder up to ultimately what this thing means. I just wanted to put that out there because it's just the way that he's saying, what is the D? It does sound more to me like why would he know about it? It makes me think that he could read the poneglyphs, but didn't know what that symbol meant.
That's an So would you say then that maybe the letter that was left behind was like a cipher for the poneglyph then?
I didn't think about that, but that kind of fits. Some kind of hint.
I like this idea because one of the things that has always been kind of weird, and this is probably more a quirk of the fact that this is a story that's, you know, being written in real time for a very long time. But the idea that the D is a name, is in people's names. We know that the government will be more than happy to commit various war crimes to obscure a lot of this information. And we know that some D clan members actively do hide their letter. We know that for sure. But why Monkey D Garp? That seems weird. Why Monkey D Dragon? Why Jaguar D Soul? There are a lot of Ds that are just actively running around and have been allowed to run around for an extended period of time. Like, this isn't even just, oh, they don't want to go to war with Luffy right now, or he's not worth the time right now. I'm talking about Luffy as a kid. They knew they were hunting Ace, just as he was born because he was the son of the Pirate King. But they knew where Luffy was, right? If this was a thing they were actively looking for anyway, they would know Garp has a grandson over in the Goa Kingdom. Go deal with that. And while you're at it, we should deal with this Garp guy too. Now that he's getting a little bit old, he's not as useful to us. He's getting a little uppity, like that. All of that seems really interesting to me. That the reaction of the Gorosei is so just gobsmacked that Cobra might know what this means. And I think that's the moment they decide he's not walking out of that room, by the way. It seems like that's the moment, and that's how they're going to deal with this whole situation is, you're not allowed to leave now, buddy. We're going to find out where that letter is on you, and then we're done.
Well,
well,
at the same time, like him asking, like it's to what you say. There's something about it that like they will let it slide.
They will let it exist.
Garp
right?
is able to exist. Yeah. And that only adds to the mystery because it's not simple. It's not a matter of just, the D clan or automatic, like we got to get rid of them. It's almost like they know that it would be maybe futile because there'd just be another one to pop up. And it's not something they can stamp out, so they have to stamp out knowledge of what it means.
And maybe that's the answer. Maybe just like the concept of inherited will is too powerful, so they try to subvert it. It's interesting. Shanks, for example, we know what motivated Shanks. Now we know what really pushed Shanks over to like encouraging Luffy's dream, passing the hat on, kind of sending him on this path, was because of things Luffy said to him about his own dreams. He said the things Roger said, more so than his name. So even with keeping that keeping that thread of what is the D, what could it mean? You would assume if Shanks does have the same knowledge as the rest of the Roger Pirates, he would know, wouldn't he? Or even Rayleigh. But Rayleigh was only interested in Luffy based on what Shanks told him. So it being, like, the letter itself being the end-all be-all doesn't seem to be the point. Like, what does the D stand for doesn't really seem to be the question. I think it's literally how it's written here. What is the D? What does it mean to be a D clan member, or to have that? The Westerner in me is like D, but like there's something else to it, right? A commonality, and sometimes things that somebody doesn't have. Like Teach has been noted multiple times to kind of not necessarily fit into the definition of what a D actually is. So it's hard. It's one of those things where I want to lean into this idea with you that it's a symbol that means something a little bit more than just a single word, or something that even can just be translated off of Poneglyph. That's an interesting idea, and I think clears up a lot of those holes.
I think worth rereading chapter 507, which is, not the first time, the idea of the Will of D is invoked, I don't think. But that's the chapter where Robin asks Rayleigh about it, right? And she asks him, what is it, basically? She brings up that the poneglyph in Shandora specifically, mentions that it was Gold D Roger. And, that's when Rayleigh kind of reveals, like, oh yeah, I know what happened and everything. It's interesting, though, that when she's talking about that, that's not the thing that like gets on Luffy's nerves, and Luffy's just like, stop it, Rayleigh's a little bit like, oh, I'll tell you if I have to, but no, Luffy cares more about like the One Piece. And so that leads me to believe too that, it really does seem to have something to do not with the One Piece itself, but and people have their theories. I know, like I saw a theory where the idea of the D is that, like, two Ds put together, and then one piece. Okay, sure. It's just, there's all kinds of things, like endless speculation, right?
It's the original, like that and what is One Piece are the two original mysteries, right? So for one, you're compelled to put the two together.
Yes.
And for two, it could be anything. It could be anything.
It could just be a coincidence that people just have this initial sometimes, and it'll mean nothing. It'll be like, oh, yeah, that's just my middle name. It's Derek. So Monkey Derek Luffy.
Yeah. So here's another fun thing, since we're talking about this now. Kureha knows about the Will of D. She was the first character to make it more than a piece of trivia. Because we knew Oda was hiding it. Oda had said, "It's like I can't tell you yet. Don't worry about it."
Right.
But in the story, that's where we got the phrase. And so it's interesting that she has this knowledge and was even on Mary Joie during the reverie with Dalton. She was there.
Yes. She was trying to cure his illness.
Yeah, right under their nose was somebody else who has this information potentially.
Right.
And I'm curious how she has that. It's a thing we've never looped back around to, but that old lady's got some info.
Yeah. I think she specifically said that people who have that initial cause problems.
Yeah. She said, my reindeer has caught up with a dangerous man now.
Have you ever seen that theory? Some people think that Kureha was part of the Rocks Pirates.
I could buy that.
Yeah.
Timeline lines up.
Her age, yeah. She could have been the doctor of the crew because there's no established like Rocks pirate crew member. So
I'm into
kind
that.
of an interesting.
I'm into that.
Yeah, I forget the arguments for that theory. I think there were more, but anyway.
It's an older character. Now that we know that like older characters can count as Rocks Pirates members, and they could also be cloned. I think she's old. She has pirate-like tendencies. She has information that otherwise is unknown. Sure.
It'd be funny that the Doctor of the Roger Pirates and the Doctor of the Rocks Pirates were so close to each other, or are so close to each other in proximity.
That would be funny.
Put out there.
That would be. I mean, we know for a fact that like the conflict between the Rocks Pirates and the Roger Pirates, as serious as it must have been, even that wasn't really enough to like make them mortal enemies with each other. You know, Roger, of course, has that relationship with Whitebeard. Who is to say that Kuriha isn't going over and having a drink with Crocus every once in a while? Did we ever find out who visited him, by the way?
No.
all these years, and I still every once in a while go, hey, wait a minute. Did we ever... Has no one asked in an SBS about that? There's no way. And yet, we still don't.
So
you told me before this that you had a big Will of D theory. Is that it? Was it the poneglyph thing? Okay.
Yeah,
you made it sound. You made it sound like you were gonna completely pie in the sky. But I think that's actually a pretty solid read on where we're at. I like that idea a lot.
I did have another element to it that was a little bit wilder. But as I was kind of developing it, I was like, well, that doesn't really quite work. So I kind of backtracked it a little bit to like just the poneglyph thing. But there was something else to it.
Commit.
I'm going to save it because I want it to be nice and special and airtight. Because I really did have to change it because it had to do with some of the poneglyphs we've seen. So I was like looking at like actual poneglyphs that have been in the manga and anime, and I thought that I had come across something that could maybe really like bring that idea out and like basically like have a sense. I tried to be Robin, okay? I tried to read the poneglyphs. I'm gonna get in trouble. So TBD.
When we come back from break and they just tell us what the Will of D is, you're gonna really regret that.
Yeah. It's like, Travis, I quit my job. I spent every day just poring over those poneglyphs.
Tying string together.
Meanwhile, Oda's penciling stuff. She's like, oh, this doesn't really mean anything, but it's fun. I'm just like
I refuse to believe that Oda ever just draws it. It's just like, this doesn't mean anything. This is just a squiggle. Like, no, that's not him.
I disagree with that. I found a lot of things he draws to just be like he's just having a good old time, and he just. Speaking of which, okay. So the Shirahoshi getting captured thing, I didn't have much to say here, except I'm shocked that Charlos survived this. We know he survived this, unless they're covering up his death, which I guess is possible.
It says attempted murder. I'm going to leave it at that. Charlos is just he has the actual ultimate defense.
Which is?
I guess being a real piece of crap.
He has color of arms. It really is weird because, like, Luffy got that real good punch in, right? He got hurt earlier that day in the Reverie. It's almost like getting that badly hurt by Luffy just made him stronger.
I mean, that's how you get good with hockey, right?
For all we know, this could be a hint that the Celestial Dragons are just a lot more resistant to things. I mean, Doflamingo. We kind of credit him being such a tough person to his devil fruit and being a pirate since he was a kid. But, maybe there was a reason why, Treble and them flocked to him and cultivated him as their pirate captain because they knew as a celestial dragon, he had the making of somebody really durable. I guess that's not really true for his parents and stuff. I guess it's not foolproof, but I don't know.
It's one of those things where, in all seriousness, it shouldn't be taken seriously. The point realistically isn't that Charlos is he's got such high resistance. It's the Nami situation, right? Where Nami is more powerful than Luffy when they're on the boat because she has to be. She has to put him in line. And
you think Leo and Sai weren't at full power? Because it looks...
No, I think it's just... I think the point is more that they did it rather than the logistics of how powerful it was. This is, again, one of those things you're trying to power scale St. Charlos. You might be missing the point, which is that they have physically assaulted a celestial dragon, which is not only a thing that they're Inspiration also did. It's the same guy. And I don't even think they know that.
They drilled him into the ground.
Yeah, no,
how does he survive?
It's a gag manga. Because it's a gag manga, and Oda's not done with him yet. Do you know how hard it is to kill someone in One Piece?
I mean, I was going to make the joke earlier that like Luffy's dream is to be the one who finally snuffs out Pell's life.
I don't even know if he could do it. Like I would call it plot armor, but that's not even what it is.
We would need Gear 6 for that to happen.
Man, no, but
it's
for real,
Luffy as a kid.
Yeah, right. Luffy literally becomes the kid from the Lego Movie and just like has all knowing powers now.
Yeah, sure, why not?
No, I do really think it's interesting though that we are seeing some members of the Grand Fleet kind of following in Luffy's footsteps. In a very literal sense here. And we know that they are supposed to get caught up in things eventually. And I had not heard this theory before, but like I said, I've been so hyped about everything that I've had to actually start going and looking at theories again. And I'd heard that I guess there's a running theory that we might see not necessarily a full-on return to Impel Down, but a real like cutaway, like one of these kind of cutaways, to potentially like release Doflamingo or check in on Bone Clay or, at this point, see how Sai and Leo are doing because they got caught by the world government, kind of thing. And that's an interesting idea that the Grand Fleet might find themselves in a situation where they have to pony up and go save somebody from Impel Down for, quote unquote attempting to murder a celestial dragon. As far as we know, they got away, but that doesn't mean they're going to get away with it. You know what I mean? Like, not even the Straw Hats got away with that.
I mean, I do wonder, we've talked about this before. I like the idea that the incident is going to be tied to Egghead. And them like being involved with that. I think we talked about like, what if the Grand Fleet comes in, because we are sort of seeing some of them here. And, if there was some sort of indication that they would be going to Egghead for whatever reason. I know you subscribe to the thing where like they have to be called upon or something, right?
Yeah, something
and that
hasn't
happened, obviously.
Yeah, something has to rally them, right? Because they went their separate ways. There has to be something, because if they're all involved in this incident, So I don't think the attack on Charlos is the incident, to be clear. I think something has to.
So we know the Vegapunk thing is an incident.
Yeah, the Vegapunk thing is definitely an incident. And it could be not necessarily that they go to Egghead, but whatever happens at Egghead is the inciting incident for them. And because we know that they're supposed to call on each other if they're needed. That's basically how Luffy put it. He's like, you don't report to me. You're not my subordinates. But if you need help, I'll come do a punch. And you do the same for me. And I just keep... Like, that's kind of what I think has to happen, is there's got to be a situation that forces and like all of these relatively powerful crews to come together again. And, we know that there's a war coming. We know there's a bunch of things coming. But, like, again, second Impel Down jailbreak. It's one of the few callbacks we haven't gotten yet in the post-time skip.
I agree. But all that said, I do agree with you that seeing them in action was fun. We get an explanation for how Kuma got out. It was just, morally somehow got away from Green Bull. Not exactly sure how, but he did. And, I mean, he has a devil fruit that allows him to get out of these sticky situations. And I guess the implication is that he was just trying to hold off Green Bull, not that he was, like, stuck in a fight with him. Similar thing with Karasu and Fujitora, right? So he just kind of gets Kuma out. And I think that's the last we're going to see of, the Revolutionary Army, like these characters in general, in the Reverie and like all this stuff. I think we really are just like a couple scenes away from wrapping this up, because at this point it does come down to, Sabo, maybe one more revelation involving either a Holy Knight or something that has to do with Lily or Emu. And then after that, I think we're going to be jumping over to what in the world is going to happen. I mean, there's no other arc like this, right? Like there really isn't. Like it is amazing how we are just, I mean, I guess the most similar one is like when we were checking in with the Straw Hats on all these different islands when they got split up.
Well, and
But even then,
that was cover stories in the manga.
Yeah, in the anime they gave him like whole episodes,
right? Which was a good call, but from like a structure of the story perspective, you're right. There's never been anything like this. We are so tantalizingly close to something resembling an answer to things. It feels unreal,
right? And it does make me wonder. Do you think this is kind of the new normal for One Piece, that we're not really going to have any sort of arc like we used to, where it's just the Straw Hats going to an island, causing some stuff, and then that's the end of that? Because if so, it kind of got me a little bit sad. It was, if he wanted to end that structure with Wano, I don't know. I mean,
I think it's one of those things where in reality, we have kind of said goodbye to that structure a long time ago. The closest you could really say that it's happened is Punk Hazard. And I think that is very much a transitory arc in and of itself, because it kicks off basically everything that would eventually culminate in Wano. And and this happens with other series, and when they do things like time skips and stuff too. A lot of times the purposes of it is to kind of clear the board and set the stage for kind of a new tone and a structure. And it is definitely sad. I think it's one of these things where like we're firmly in this final saga. We're firmly in it. So if you're Oda, you have choices you have to make. And that is, how much more time are you really going to be able to afford to everything? Because in the past, a lot of stuff like this would be cover stories. If the Reverie wasn't happening where it was, and we moved it around somewhere in the timeline, I could very easily see everything that we saw happen in these pieces, in these chapters, textless entirely, and used as cover stories. Morley is holding Green Bull. That's a cover story in and of itself. Cobra is taken into the room with the Gorosei. That's a cover story. Like, easily. But we can't be doing that anymore, because the point of the cover stories was ultimately to expand on context that the manga didn't have room for, because Oda was doing all of the adventuring. At this point, knowing that he does in fact want to actually end the story, I think he's making the decision to front that, we went to Egghead and we had a lot of that fun stuff where they were kind of dinking around, causing problems. That's kind of more or less what it's been up until we started getting this cutaways to these other parts of the world. And maybe that's what we're doing is, the Straw Hats are still going to be their goofy selves, but we just cannot spend all of our time with them anymore. And maybe that was the point of Wano splitting them up for so long, was to get us used to that. It's one of those things where he only gets so many pages a week. He only gets so many weeks in the year for his own sake. And at the end of the day, he's never going to fit it all in. This is the Zoro conundrum. A lot of people wanted Zoro stuff in Wano, more Zoro stuff in Wano. They wanted those details, and I don't fault them because the pieces were there, and it was clear that Oda had at least thought about them at one point, because he was very easily able to spit the whole lineage of his family out in an SBS. These are not things that Oda just comes up with lightly. Sometimes he does. He doesn't invent his characters' birthdays. The fans do, but when it comes to stuff like this, like these little things that we pick up on and we ask in an SBS, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm glad you picked up on it." There's stuff he's thinking about all the time, but we're no longer in this nebulous time frame where One Piece is going to go on forever. It will end. We're closer to the end now than we've ever been, and yeah, it feels a little bit sad that we're never going to get one of those classic arcs. But I think the trade-off for that is all of that setup that those did are now finally going to pay off. And I think Oda is ready to do it, and I think we're ready for it. Or we're going to go insane.
I want to end this whole thing with something you don't expect.
Okay.
And I want to end with the color spread.
Oh.
So I have a couple of things to bring up here. First of all, I think it's kind of interesting that on the color spread, pay attention to like the characters that are on the Sunny, not the fish. They're all characters who are considered like Straw Hat royal, like real Nakama. Yamato, I would say Otama, considering her role in the raid. Vivi, of course, Robin. interesting that Koala is there. I kind of just wanted to point that out, that like Koala being connected to the Straw Hats could be a fun little foreshadowing here. You could also say Carrot. Carrot's like jumping, but Carrot's not on the ship. Just point that out there. The second thing I wanted to point out is there's a lot of kerfuffle. People being like, well, why is Yamato in the color spread?
I was
the color
wondering
spread,
if this was going to come up.
Well, the color spread is nothing but women, but Yamato is Odin, right? So it's very strange. But then I was like, well, they do have Zeus in here too, so I guess they made an exception for Yamato. Because Yamato likes to hang out with the girls too. Yamato hangs out with the guys and the girls. Yamato has fun. That's all I was going to say about that.
Yeah, it's not that hard, everyone. Like, everybody, like, that was what everybody wanted to talk about, right? Was have this whole big litigation. And it's like, have you been reading a different manga than I have, people? Like Oda has challenged the very concept of gender for a majority of this manga. Yamato is very easy to figure out. Yamato is our she/her king. If that's hard, I get it, because like breaking the gender binary is a relatively new concept for a lot of us, myself included. But like Yamato, we know, for example, like her pronouns are she/her based on the Vibra card, but that doesn't necessarily preclude wanting to be emblematic of masculine traits. And I think that's the big thing when it comes to trying to understand how this works, where she says, I'm Odin. It's not really saying that, like, I'm going to present as a man, or, in the same way as even Kiku. Kiku is trans in the most literal sense, according to their Viva card. Yes. So, and even Ivankov, doesn't necessarily identify, in the canon specifically as one gender or the other. Like, they're very much about that very nature of fluidity. So with Yamato, she's very much presenting feminine, but she's living quote unquote masculine traits. And I think that's kind of the point Oda is trying to make with her, is that these things aren't necessarily locked to your biological sex or even your presentation. I think, as you see like him writing characters like Bon Clay, I know that I love Bon Clay, but I know there's been criticism of him, especially from like trans fans who think that he's kind of a clown. He's kind of a show. And even Ivankov in that same way, where it's like, oh, it's just a drag queen, especially with the way things are right now in America. I can understand why those might be a little bit of like problematic perceptions, but I do think like Kiku and Yamato are examples that Oda himself continues to learn and grow and research these things. I think that Yamato is a genuine effort to try to continue that legacy of like trying to be inclusive in a way that, even if it doesn't make clear sense to like those of us who are, cis, in a way that I hope, people do see themselves in. And that's a part of why I adore Yamato so much, is kind of because there's no one quite like her in the story.
Well, all fair, all good. Here's the other thing I was going to bring up, though, because you thought you were going to get out of this scot-free. You thought it's like, that's it. No more John sense, right? So I thought it was interesting when I saw that Vivi had a shirt that said Tiger. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Tiger, yeah. And then this whole thing has a whole thing about Lily, right? And I was thinking Tiger and Lily. And you know what I thought of? Peter Pan.
Oh,
and
okay.
Ever since you mentioned the thing about Emu being a child, I just can't get the idea of Neverland out of my head. And it almost makes me kind of wonder if Oda would do a Peter Pan kind of thing, where there are characters who never grow up. And there's like some sort of like extra thing that he's like, maybe the Vivi thing just might be the thing that triggered the thought. But I mean, Tiger Lily is like, a princess, within a tribe in a kingdom with like pirates. And I'm just saying there's a lot there. I could absolutely see Oda loving the story of Peter Pan and wanting to incorporate it, especially because Peter Pan and Luffy have a lot of similar traits. Luffy even has like a problematic shadow in Blackbeard.
And his literal shadow, mind you.
But then we also just have the whole thing with Lost Boys, like a pirate crew. There's a lot of stuff you can do there.
I mean, wouldn't Joy Boy be a Lost Boy? Could he even be Peter Pan? Would you say?
What if Luffy's dream is that he wants to fly? He can fly.
What if Luffy's dream is just to never grow up? I mean, that's a childish thought, right?
I mean, look. People can take it for what it is, but if we're anticipating like what other islands can we go to, what other places can we go to that are just wild and free and interesting? We have Elbaf coming up, I guess, but a Neverland kind of place I think could be a really cool location. So
do we know anything about Lodestar Island?
No,
Lodestar.
do not.
Lodestar. North Star. Second star to the right.
We'll be there by morning. Yeah. How the song goes.
I mean,
Oda likes Disney. We got Dressrosa.
He loves. I mean, this empty throne is definitely some Game of Thrones stuff. So, I mean, my guy will just straight up rip something off if he likes it.
Yeah, I think did he even say as much of like, oh, I got really into Game of Thrones?
Yeah,
and
he's very openly he's like, I am so into this. I wonder how Oda feels about the ending to Game of Thrones. Someone should ask him.
He's probably like, oh, I didn't watch it. Waiting for George to finish the.
Oh yeah. I was gonna say. I wonder if he sees himself in the structure of it.
Always warms my heart to find out that America has its weebs, but Japan has its whatever they call it.
Ameribus.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, that works. I have no idea if that's the official term.
Well, maybe it will be. But okay, like we said, break next week. I think that's all the time we have for this one. But Travis, what we confirm what we're doing for the next episode, or do you want to hold off on that? Announce it in the Discord.
Let's announce it in the Discord. But it will be coming pretty soon, and I will give you a little bit of a hint. We are going to have a brand new guest joining us for an episode, and I'm very excited. Very exciting. Is
this guest a One Piece fan? I forgot to ask you.
I don't know. There's only one way to find out.
Yeah, we're just going to have to ask them. Okay, so that said, don't forget if you have any feedback on the show or want to talk to us, our Discord link is in the show notes, but you can also email us, rickypirateраdio@gmail.com. But until then, we'll see you for chapter 1085 in a little over a week or so. See y'all.